I stood alone as my father took his last breath. No hands holding mine. No whispered prayers. No tearful goodbyes from the people who should have been there. In the room next to ours, I could hear soft sobbing, the rustle of hands clutched together. A family saying goodbye the way we all hoped to, together, messy, loud with love. But mine? Silent. My husband, Evan, never came. Neither did my siblings, Rachel and Aaron. No calls. No texts. Just a blank thread and a colder silence than the hospital air. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I'd been waiting for this moment for days, maybe years, as Dad slipped further away. Each visit had been a little quieter, a little harder to watch. But I never missed a day, even when he stopped speaking, even when he barely opened his eyes. I stayed. I didn't expect them to, really. Evan had work. My siblings had lives. They had all chosen their distance long before the heart monitor began its final song. The doctor gently rested his hand on my shoulder and spoke in a low, rehearsed voice. Time of death, 3:17 a.m. And just like that, it was over. I stood there, still and upright, while the room buzzed with quiet movements, the nurse turning off machines, removing IVs. I barely registered them, until one of the nurses, a woman I hadn't seen before, stepped forward and looked directly at me. She didn't say her name. She just handed me a thick, sealed envelope. He asked me to give this to you. Only you. After. The envelope was cream-colored, old-fashioned, and heavy. My name, Celeste, written in his handwriting. No, to my daughter. No date, just my name. I took it with both hands like it might break. Later, after I signed the forms, shook hands with the chaplain, and left the building, I sat in my car and stared at the envelope on my lap. I knew my father well. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't believe in letters or grand gestures. So whatever was in this had to matter. I opened it with trembling fingers. What I found inside didn't just rewrite everything I believed about him. It changed how I saw my entire family, and it gave me the key to take back something I didn't even know I'd lost. My father wasn't warm. Not in the way other dads were. He wasn't the hug you at the door, I'm proud of you kind of parent. His love came through in grocery bags dropped off when I was struggling in grad school, in checking the oil in my car when I visited, in nods across the room that said, I see you. But he never missed a moment that mattered. Unlike everyone else. My husband, Evan, used to be charming. In the beginning, he said all the right things, supportive, ambitious, full of ideas. But somewhere between our second anniversary and his third job change, I became the background character in my own marriage. The one who paid the bills, made the meals, and absorbed his cold moods like a sponge. He hated visiting the hospital, claimed it drained his spirit, said watching someone die was too depressing. When I asked him to come with me to see my father just once, he said, you know, I was never close to him. But my siblings? Their absence hurt more. Rachel and Aaron were born performers. Rachel taught yoga and lived on Instagram. All soft quotes and weekend retreats. Aaron managed a marketing firm, only spoke in business metaphors, and hadn't said, I love you since high school. Dad didn't fit into their lives anymore. Too rigid, too honest. They stopped visiting him after he sold the lake house. Said he was being selfish, liquidating our memories without consulting anyone. Never mind that they hadn't paid a dime for it. I was the only one who kept coming back. I showed up every Sunday, even when he didn't remember my name. I brought books to read aloud, played the jazz records he loved, refilled his water even when nurses told me they had it covered. And still no one joined me. No phone calls. No guilt. Like we'd already buried him before the machines did. But that night, the letter changed something. It wasn't a will. It wasn't a list of regrets. It was a blueprint to something he'd kept secret, something deliberate, something meant for me and no one else. In that letter, he told the truth about everything. About Rachel, about Aaron, about Evan, about the real reason they stopped showing up, and the real plan he'd been working on while everyone else turned away. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was an invitation and a warning. The letter wasn't long, just 2 pages, handwritten, folded with care. But the words inside it were heavy. Celeste, they've been circling like vultures. Don't trust the silence. It isn't ignorance. It's intent. At first, I didn't know what he meant. But when I read further, it became clearer. My father hadn't just noticed the distance between us all, he had documented it. He wrote that shortly after his diagnosis, Rachel and Aaron approached him separately, each suggesting early estate planning. They asked about properties, bank accounts, even my mother's jewelry, gone for nearly a decade. Neither of them ever mentioned care, or visits, or what he wanted, just assets. My father told them he was leaving everything in a trust, no details, just that it was taken care of. He said their interest cooled quickly after that. Rachel stopped calling altogether. Aaron visited once, brought a bottle of wine, stayed 20 minutes and never returned. My father noted it in the letter like a bookkeeper tracking debt. He left the cork on the counter and didn't say goodbye. He wrote that Evan, my husband, had visited too. Only once. Alone. That part turned my stomach. I had no idea he'd gone. Apparently, Evan told my father that Celeste doesn't need to know everything. That it was time to manage expectations about inheritance. That he could help ease the process. A phrase so cold it felt like steel across my skin. Dad ended that section of the letter with, I saw enough that day to know the difference between blood and loyalty. And suddenly everything made sense. The distance. The convenient busyness. The way Evan stopped asking about my visits. The way Rachel blocked me when I reminded her about Dad's birthday. The way Aaron always changed the subject when I mentioned the hospital. They weren't just pulling away. They were cutting me out. Not just emotionally, financially, strategically. And they thought he wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't notice. But he did. And now, so how'd I? In the final paragraph, my father wrote, there's something you need to find. It's not in a safety deposit box. It's not in a bank. It's where the truth belongs, right where they least expect it. He didn't say what, just where to look. But the one thing I now knew for certain, his silence wasn't weakness. It was patience. He'd watched them erase him. And now he'd left me the match. The clue in the letter was vague, intentionally so. It's not in a safety deposit box. It's not in a bank. It's where the truth belongs, right where they least expect it. My first thought? The house. Not the big one. Not the family home Rachel once called soulless and Aaron barely acknowledged after Mom passed. That house had been sold off 5 years ago. But my father had another place. A smaller one. A cabin. He'd bought it quietly after the sale, deep in the woods about 2 hours north, near a lake where he used to fish as a young man. I'd only been there once. Helped him paint the porch, fix the screen door. It was peaceful, unremarkable. I'd forgotten about it until that line in the letter snapped it back into memory. They wouldn't look there. They didn't even know it existed. And that's exactly why it had to be the place. I took a day off work and told no one. Not Evan, not Rachel, not Aaron. I packed a bag, filled the gas tank, and drove through quiet highways until the signs thinned out and the road curved into trees. The cabin looked the same, modest, still a little weather-worn. The key was still hidden under the flower pot. I let myself in. Everything was just as he'd left it. A pile of unread newspapers on the table. A jacket over the back of a chair. His favorite book, 100 Years of Solitude. Still dog-eared at page 219. And then I saw it. A small safe tucked behind the fireplace panel, the one I helped him install. He once joked that if the apocalypse ever came, he'd store coffee and jazz records in there. Now I knew better. I found the key inside a teacup in the kitchen. And when I turned it, what I saw inside made me sit down hard. There were documents, photos, a thumb drive, a second envelope with my name, and a certified copy of a new will, signed and notarized, dated 4 months ago. I opened it with shaking hands. Everything, the cabin, his savings, remaining investments, retirement accounts, even the rare coin collection he never talked about. All of it was left to me. Only me. And attached to the will, in his crisp handwriting. If they didn't show up to say goodbye, they don't deserve to show up for what I left behind. He'd planned this. All of it. They had bet on him being weak. But he'd saved his strength for one final move. And now it was my turn to make one. I didn't tell them anything right away. I returned from the cabin the same way I left, silent. unannounced, controlled. Evan barely noticed I'd been gone. He asked if I was feeling better now that the funeral arrangements were over. I nodded. He didn't ask where I'd been. I didn't offer. That weekend, I contacted my father's attorney, a woman named Evelyn, sharp as a knife and twice as quiet. She confirmed what I already knew. My father had updated the will in full, with witnesses and airtight documentation. And he had made one special request. The reading of the will must take place in person. No advance notice. No previews. All beneficiaries present or forfeited. Classic Dad. He hated phone calls. Believed important things should be said face to face. Even now, he was forcing them to look me and each other in the eye. Evelyn handled the invites. We set the meeting for a Tuesday evening in her office. I told Evan it was a formality and that my siblings had been invited as well. He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Maybe he thought there'd be something in it for him. The truth? There wouldn't be. When we arrived, Rachel was already seated, sunglasses on indoors, sipping overpriced bottled water. Aaron came in 5 minutes late, Bluetooth earpiece still in, and barely acknowledged me. Evan sat beside me and checked his watch 3 times in 10 minutes. Finally, Evelyn entered. She looked at each of us and gave a brief, polite smile. Then she opened the folder. This is the last will and testament of Thomas Emmanuel Ward, dated 4 months prior to his passing. I watched Rachel's posture stiffen. Aaron leaned forward, clearly expecting to hear numbers. Evelyn read everything. Slowly, clearly. Property, investments, the cabin, the coin collection, liquid assets. And every line ended with the same words. To my daughter, Celeste Ward. Nothing for Rachel. Nothing for Aaron. Nothing for Evan. Rachel laughed, short and high-pitched. Aaron said, "This must be a mistake." Evan turned to me with disbelief, as if he'd just realized I'd been playing chess while they all played checkers. But the best moment? When Evelyn pulled out the final envelope, the one labeled in the event of disputes. Inside was a flash drive. She plugged it into a small speaker, and my father's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, you chose absence. Celeste chose presence. The difference between the two is everything. No one spoke after that, because what could they say? They had disappeared when it counted, and now, so had their inheritance. The fallout started before we even left the building. Rachel stormed out first, knocking over the sleek chrome water stand in the hallway as she passed. I heard her mutter something about lawyers and exploitation. She didn't look back. Aaron stayed a little longer, asking Evelyn ridiculous questions like whether digital wills were enforceable and whether my father had been influenced. You mean manipulated? Evelyn asked flatly. He didn't answer. Evan didn't say a word until we got to the car. He sat behind the wheel in silence for a full minute before turning to me. Did you know about this? I stared at him. Would it have mattered if I did? His jaw clenched. You could have said something. So could you, I replied, like the part where you visited my dying father behind my back. That shut him up. We didn't speak the rest of the way home. Over the next week, I heard the rest of collapse through whispers, texts, and secondhand sources. Rachel made a dramatic post online, something about betrayal, false narratives, and staying strong despite cruelty. Her yoga followers cheered her on, but some of our relatives saw through it. A cousin messaged me privately, "Your dad was no fool. Whatever he did, I'm sure it was earned." Aaron tried to contest the will, filed an official inquiry with Evelyn's office. He didn't get far. My father had anticipated everything. Evelyn sent him a PDF of a signed statement, video witness, time-stamped, and backed by a full psychiatric evaluation. Ironclad. Aaron dropped the challenge within 48 hours. But Evan? Evan was the real surprise. Not because he left. Because he didn't. Instead, he got cold. Then clingy. Then strategic. Flowers. Breakfasts. That sudden spark in his eye he used to have when he saw potential. He saw money now. He thought he could pivot. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already met with a divorce attorney. Quietly. Confidently. Because the cabin, the inheritance, the trust, they were all protected. My father had made sure of it. Anything earned through the estate was off limits unless I chose to share it, which I wouldn't, because that wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And justice didn't need noise. It just needed to hold. For the first time in years, my mornings were quiet, and they stayed that way. No Evan pacing the kitchen, pretending to look busy while avoiding questions. No passive-aggressive texts from Rachel. No guilt-laced silence from Aaron. Just coffee, birds, and space. I stayed in the cabin for a week after the will reading. At first, I just sat, in silence, letting it all settle. I cooked, read, took walks by the lake. There was no luxury, no marble countertops or manicured hedges. But I breathed easier than I had in a decade. I opened my father's thumb drive on the third day. Inside were scans of old family photos, letters I'd written him as a child, and a folder titled, "For Her Future." Inside were financial breakdowns, property transfers, legal instructions, and a note. "Don't let them rewrite your story, Celeste. Own it." I did. Back in the city, I filed for divorce. I didn't warn Evan. I didn't explain. The papers arrived at his office on a Wednesday. He texted me 2 words. "You're serious?" I didn't respond. I moved into a small condo under the name of a holding trust Evelyn helped me set up, fully funded by the cabin sale and a portion of the estate. The rest went into investments, quiet ones, smart ones, and I started writing again, not for work, for me, about grief, about inheritance, about being the person in the room no one thinks will speak until she does. One piece went viral, a short essay titled "The Last One Standing." No names, just truth. I began consulting part-time, helping women navigate legal empowerment, how to read a will, how to protect an inheritance, how to walk away before someone steals your worth. One client told me, "You don't talk like someone who lost everything." I smiled. That's because I didn't. I finally kept something for myself. I didn't hear from Rachel or Aaron again, and Evan eventually stopped emailing. But I did receive one letter months later from my niece, Rachel's daughter. "Mom says I shouldn't reach out, but I wanted to thank you for the books you sent when I was little. I still have them. I hope you're okay. You always seemed like the only honest one." I cried reading that, not because I was sad, because I realized I wasn't invisible. I was just quiet enough for people to assume I'd never step forward. They were wrong. I visit the lake once a year now, not because I need to, because I want to. It's quiet there, not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask anything of you. The kind of peace my father must have found when he chose that cabin over company. I bring wildflowers, a folding chair, a flask of tea. Sometimes I sit for hours and say nothing. Other times I read. Once, I even laughed out loud, not at a memory but at myself, at how long I waited for people to choose me when all along I could have chosen myself. My father didn't leave me wealth to spoil me. He left it to free me, to protect me from people who used love like leverage, from a husband who saw me as a support beam, from siblings who saw me as a wallet, from a life where silence was mistaken for softness and softness mistaken for weakness. Before he died, he didn't say much, just held my hand and looked at me for a long time. Now, I understand what that look meant. It was a goodbye, yes, but it was also a passing of the torch. Not a burden, but power. Real, quiet, irreversible power. There's a journal entry I wrote the night I moved into the condo. Just 6 words. "I will not be erased again." I still keep that page bookmarked, because that's the real inheritance. Not the cabin, not the money, not the will. The reminder that I was never the invisible one. I was just surrounded by people who refused to see. Now, they can watch from a distance. They can wonder what I'm doing. They can feel the silence they once gifted me and sit in it themselves. Because I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Done proving. Done waiting. Done giving away pieces of myself just to be invited to a table I helped build. And when people ask why I walked away without a fight, I just smile and say, some stories don't end with a bang. Some end with a woman standing at the edge of a lake, knowing she never needed to scream to be heard.